And now I'm very excited to bring back a man who I've been a fan of for a very long time. You've heard him on radio shows and sports podcasts all across the country. Very happy to welcome back Mr. Tony George from DocsSports.com. You can follow him on Twitter at TGeorgeSports. Football is finally back, Tony. We got a full slate of games, no bye weeks. We got the NFL, we got college. How's the prep going for you?
Well, it's kind of a tough week this week because of the holiday, and I had travel, and then we got this full first week of the NFL. Obviously, anybody that's worth their salt, Kiev has been, doing the handicapping these lines for the last 3 or 4 months and looking at these games and seeing what unfolded in the preseason, which gives you a small indication, not a large indication. But, you don't want to bank a whole lot on what you saw in the preseason. There's certain things you're looking for. And, of course, college football provided some surprises last week, as I think the average bettor found out that we are not in midseason form yet, that these are the first games for these teams. And the other thing that's got me a little concerned, I guess, in the opening weeks of the season right now is this COVID-19. And players testing positive. Over at DocsSports.com, the company policy is to put all the picks out on Thursday at 5 Central in the evening. And that goes through Monday Night Football. And for line value and various different reasons on a corporate side of things. But then, I put out, fortunately, the under in that Ole Miss game on Monday. But when you see the head coach, someone like Lane Kiffin that's entrenched himself in the offense almost like a player, and for him to not be at the game because of COVID, it didn't come out till after you released your picks and this, that, and the other. It happened to go in my favor in that game. I don't think they would have exceeded the 76 with him, but it could have went the other way as well. So you're going to have some different variables in the world that we're living in right now that we haven't had to deal with in the past. And so there's going to be some volatility this year in the betting markets because of that. So it's definitely going to be an interesting year.
100%. And I think that even what's gotten me worried is as soon as we started finding out early in the summer that vaccinated people are getting it too, I'm like, well, I mean, they're going to have to sit out. Even if they're vaccinated, because the NFL didn't change that rule. So I think you're right, and we are going to face some of this back and forth. And I think maybe my idea is I should like to hit the lines very early and then very late. I'll probably have less very early unless they're really off, and I think I'm going to get some value, and then look kind of late with some of these lines. So agree with you 100%. And yeah, man, that game, holy cow. I gave out Ole Miss at -9 before Lane Kiffin got it. So it was like a 2-week-old line. I was like, oh, geez. When it came out he wasn't going to be there, I didn't like it aside at all, but I didn't want to buy out of it. It was just kind of like, I just hope it worked out. And it did work out for the best. But from a total standpoint, that thing was a dead under until that fourth quarter when they're scoring like 28, 35 points, whatever it was. It got a little bit dicey at the end, and they drove all the way to the 10-yard line when they had 68 points. So you had under 76, so you were protected. But there's a lot of people under 73, under 74, and numbers matter when it comes to that. So
yeah, it was interesting this week. You always watch the ESPN with Scott Van Pelt, and they had the bad beats section, and there was a game that the over and under was 68. I forgot the game now, but the over and under was 68, and the halftime score was 6-3, and it still went over. It got into overtime and, this, that, and the other. And so, and I was just watching that going, crap, it's really here. Here we go.
Here we go.
Here we go. And I think the one thing about some of these deals that I would urge people that are betting sports that are watching your show, and I know there's a lot of them out there, you don't want to if you have, say you placed a wager on, Iowa versus Iowa State. We're going to talk about that game. And on Thursday, and it comes out on Saturday morning that so-and-so and so-and-so isn't going to play, or that the coach for Iowa Friends is going to be out. This is all hypothetical, but this is going to happen to you this year. I would say not to overreact and hedge back right away. What I would say is this is where the advantage of in-game wagering comes along, where you can kind of wait and see. And then if you want to hedge at halftime, based on what you're seeing on the field, based on your experience and knowing how to look for 3 or 4 different identifiers during the game that you're going to say, that's not going to sustain itself for 4 quarters, good, bad, or indifferent. That may be the time when you get involved in something like that you're able to maybe bet out of it a little bit, cover your ass a little bit on one way or the other, or double up or, whatever. But at the end of the day, I would say it's going to happen. You're going to have to manage your expectations when it does happen. But there are a few ways you maybe say you had a $200 bet, and you hedge back in 100 on a halftime line or something, when it's truly going downhill for one team or whatever you see. So there's a little bit of recovery with the more expanded gambling options we have in the market now.
Absolutely, there is. Great point on that, because just because a key player is out, it's not like you handicap the whole game based on them. I know if it's a quarterback, it's more. It definitely is. But you know that, hey, I could get lucky here. I could have options come halftime. I can have options come the second quarter live betting like you just mentioned. So I agree with you 100%. Plus, you waited out a little bit longer, you might find out that they catch COVID or another thing happens like that. So don't rush to make judgments. I think that's a fantastic point that you just made, Tony. Speaking of points, lots of changes are happening in a conference that you know so well, being a former Big 12 guy because you're such a Nebraska guy. Yeah. And now you see the conference is getting a little bit decimated here. What are your thoughts on the changes going on to the Big 12 in general?
Well, I just think that everybody's looking for a super conference. They want to join, and the SEC is king of the hill, and then there's everybody else, and this with the way Alabama's playing, at such a high level. Clemson obviously out of the ACC, but it's I would prefer Nebraska to go back to the Big 12 in all honesty. And they're kind of the bastard child right now after all this COVID stuff that was going on in the Big Ten. And we were more like, hey, let's field the team. Let's go. We want to play our own schedule. And, there was just a lot of politics involved with that. There's a lot of politics involved in anything involving COVID right now and everything else. But, at the end of the day, the Big 12 is going to, the way they're doing it right now, I would even consider it a Power 5 conference.
Yeah, it's not. And that's what makes me wonder about the follow-up question, because they're talking about, getting UCF, Houston, Boise State, and was it BYU? It was UCF, Houston, BYU, and there was a fourth one.
Cincinnati.
And now if I'm UCF, I don't know if I make that move. No more Oklahoma, no more Texas, and maybe who's the best left football team, Iowa State, I guess. But you have Kansas for basketball. But dude, with the travel that UCF was going to have in that conference, even West Virginia is far. I wouldn't do it. I would try to hold out my hopes and get in the ACC.
Yeah, you look at Nebraska now; they're traveling out to Rutgers and going to clear to New Jersey. We used to take a bus ride down to Manhattan, Kansas. Down to Lawrence, Kansas. An hour plane ride to Stillwater or Norman. Usually a bus ride down to Columbia, Missouri, to play Missouri down there, and you got Missouri and then the SEC traveling all over the place and getting their ass handed to them. But yeah, I don't know why I don't know what the motivation is for Cincinnati or Central Florida to join a conference where, Oklahoma State is still a very viable football program and basketball program. Kansas in basketball, and then you have Iowa State, which is always the way Campbell's coaching up there. They're going to be a perennial power. He's recruiting well and doing well, but I don't see the advantages other than the upfront money for these schools. Maybe it's greed. Maybe they think that obviously the Big 12 is going to have a better TV contract payout than the AAC, but at what point in time do you sacrifice that for wins and losses? I don't know. And plus the travel schedule that you mentioned that's murderous. And the bottom line is, when you look at this, college football is still student athletes. This is not a professional sport. These are student athletes, and that much travel schedule for these kids, I just think they're, it's like everything else. I think I was talking to a friend over the Labor Day weekend just to kind of personalize it for you. And I said, you see a lot of this on social media about the good old days are gone. The old school's gone. The hometown bakery when you grew up, it made the best donuts in the world. And now there's a Dunkin' Donuts there instead. When Al's Donut Shop was the best damn maple log roll you ever ate in your life. You still talk about it 30 years later. But the old school ways, the things that we're all used to, the things that were entrenched in sports and tradition are gone. And they're not coming back, and you need to accept it. And there's a lot of change in the world, and I guess we're just going to have to roll with it. But as you mentioned, a lot of this change I sure as hell don't see a lot of advantages in it.
I don't either, and that's a great point, because I also want to mention the Oklahoma-Texas move. I mean, I think they had a much better chance to get into this quote-unquote 4-team college football playoff in the Big 12 than they do in the SEC now, because at some point this committee has to be like, look, we can't just assume SEC is better than everybody else from the top down to the middle. They're going to have to say we need some representation from the West. We need some representation from the Southwest, from the Midwest, and so you got Oklahoma over there, and they could get bounced by Alabama and Florida and Georgia every single year and have to deal with it. And plus, they're traveling farther now, too. So, my only thought is that maybe they're trying to really take that extra step and eventually get more towards a Premier League where they're not even going to play anybody but themselves and have their own championship. I think that's kind of silly, personally, because I think there's a lot more viewership to go on. And I'm wondering how it's going to work. But I think greed could be something that could take over and screw this whole thing up. So I'm excited to watch what it's going to happen. But
I think it falls squarely on the shoulders of the NCAA and their committee. They should not be allowing this.
No.
And at the end of the day, if teams like Oklahoma and Texas, and the reason that Nebraska left the Big 12, for instance, was Texas was bullying everybody, and they got their own $20 million TV contract through ESPN, and said they weren't going to share the money with the conference overall like you're supposed to. And Tom Osborne was the athletic director at the time, and his statement was, "We are not the University of Texas in Lincoln. We're the University of Nebraska, and nobody's going to push us the frick around." So, but at the end of the day, I think Oklahoma and Texas are going to be kicking themselves when sooner or later the NCAA expands the BCS playoff to 8 teams versus 4. And then you may have had not only one Big 12 team guaranteed a spot, but probably 2. And then you could take your shot and just have to play Alabama or Auburn or Georgia or one of these teams versus having to play all 3 in 1 year. And then next thing you know, you're down at the Poland Weed Eater Bowl with a 7-4 record, your tail between your legs. I mean, I think it's stupid. Yeah.
Exactly. So I'm really curious to see, and I know it's going to go to 8 or 12. It's just not happening yet. But it's they're going to get a little sense of reality here coming into the SEC. And what the SEC does have is the ESPN behind them because they own them, and they're always going to say that they're the best teams. But at some point, it's going to filter into these other conferences and be like, look, maybe if they separate, they're going to say we're the real national champion. You're not. It's just going to be back to what it was back in the 80s and 90s. Like who's the real national champion if they separate themselves? But thank you for all that info. Great points were made. We beat this thing to death, but I really enjoy your perspective because I agree with you 100%. Let's move into some of these games then coming up. And you teased this one a little bit earlier, Tony. Iowa versus Iowa State. The spread's about 3.5 to 4 points, depending upon what you're looking at. The total on this thing is 45. This, to me, is the game of the week. I know Ohio State plays Oregon. That's taken a back seat to this one for me. Yeah. Not sure about you, but what are your thoughts on this line?
Well, I think it's about right. I think that both teams got caught looking ahead a little weak, and you'll say, well, Tony, that's kind of an irresponsible statement because Iowa won 34-6 against what was perceived to be a very good Indiana team coming in here. Well, in that win, Iowa outgained Indiana by 20 yards for the entire game. They had a couple pick sixes there that really made that score lopsided. And Iowa State obviously got caught looking ahead. And last year, you remember, Iowa State was a 22-point favorite, and I can't remember who they were playing, but I took the other team. And they lost that game straight up, their opening game last year. And I should have wrote it down, but I didn't. But at the end of the day, I think they both were, that, especially Iowa State's looking ahead. I think Matt Campbell is one of the best football coaches in the country. You've got a team that has 20 starters, and living in Lincoln, Nebraska for 26 years before I moved down to Kansas City for 10 and now out in Vegas the last 3. I have been to that football stadium over in Ames, Iowa about 30 times. When I was working at ESPN and then for Yahoo Sports Radio, and just being a Nebraska fan in general and getting assigned to games over there, not only Nebraska, but Texas, Oklahoma. And I have seen lesser Iowa State teams be giant killers in there and knock those teams off over the year. It's an absolute snake pit to play in. And I think it's the home field in this game is worth a full, and I mean a full 3 points. And I liked Purdy. I like Iowa State in this game. Iowa the last 7 years is a little bit of a craw in Campbell's throat, along with all the Iowa State. Iowa's 6-1 the last 7 years and 4-2-1 against the spread against them, and they've kind of owned them. But I like the way the running game. I like the quarterback better for Iowa State here. And the one thing is, the total in this game is 45. 14 out of the last 16 have went under in this series. This is traditionally one of those 13-10, 17-14. You have a lot of those over the years. I think it's going to be more of a struggle offensively for both teams. I think probably when I see a game like this and I see a low total, I just say, where is the capability on offense to get it done? And Iowa State did not have their big stud tight end last week. It's going to go in the NFL. He'll be back this week, and he's an unstoppable force when he gets it going. I like Iowa State in this game. I really do. If you're worried about the 3.5 on the hook, maybe bet the first half line at -2, 2.5 with Iowa State. Think they'll be up by a field goal or a touchdown at halftime. I'm not going to be sold on Iowa. They didn't get outplayed, but they played evenly in a very lopsided score. This is why, folks, you always look at the box score after the game.
Well, you definitely look at the box score after the game. Iowa did outgain Indiana by about 70 yards, but it was their defense that stepped it up. I mean, the way I look at this game, you have a better defense in Iowa and you have a better offense in general in Iowa State. Both teams return a ton of production, so I'm not going to really knock either for that. But I'm one of those to think this spread's a little bit too big. And to be honest with you, Tony, I take the dog in this matchup every single year. Yeah. Especially if it's 3 or 3.5 or 4, because you're talking about this total at 45 going under, like you said. Points are at a premium when it comes to that. Mm-hmm. So the way I looked at it is this is going to come down. I think you're going to get some money on Iowa. And in my power ratings, I actually have Iowa the little bit better of a team. And I'm different than a lot of people, because a lot of people have Iowa State a little higher. So Spencer Petras, probably not as good as Purdy, but he's a big guy and he's standing up. And when I saw Iowa defend Ferguson last year against Wisconsin, it kind of did tell me that they can stop tight ends a little bit, because Ferguson's a really good tight end. Mm-hmm. So I did take the 4, but I think that if it gets below 3, I would buy back for some, for sure. And try
this is one of those games that obviously would never be a premium play because it's a coin flip ball game. I mean, obviously, Purdy goes out and throws 3 picks in the first half, the game's over. I don't care what happens in the second. I mean, it's that tight of a ball game. I just think the home field, I'm telling you, it's worth a full 3. So that, in my mind, looking at it, I'm basically getting Iowa State for -0.5.
Aren't they going to have plenty of Hawkeyes there, though? wouldn't it be 30%, 40% Hawkeyes?
Maybe 20 because the Iowa State fans won't sell their tickets to them. They hate each other.
Yeah. You would believe how much tickets are going for these days, man.
Oh, it's ridiculous.
I was going to fly to Chicago to see Wisconsin take Notre Dame, and they want to charge like $500 a seat for the suite because me and my friend were going to get it. And then we're like, forget that, and then we were looking at the club seats and they're almost the same amount. And I'm like, I enjoy plenty of football on TV. I don't need to be at a game when they're trying to gouge people because of COVID last year,
Well, try Allegiant Stadium here for a Raiders game. The cheapest ticket's $800. So the way I get in there is, speaking of Iowa State, I got a ticket for $45, 17 rows up on the 40-yard line for Iowa State UNLV at Allegiant, and that's how I'm going to get in there for $40 and then spend $25 every time I want a whiskey 7.
There you go. Exactly. So I don't know who's buying these tickets, but for me as a sports bettor, I have a much better time when I have screens in front of me and I'm in control here.
Yeah.
So one a year is what I kind of like to do, but if they're going to be like that, the suckers can go and I'll just enjoy myself. So that's the way I look at it. Let's move on to the next game then. And I think you knew, Tony, that I was going to bring this one up because you're a big fan of the Cornhuskers, and they have an interesting spot right here with Buffalo coming in. And this thing was about 11.5, and it's been creeping up. There's Nebraska money coming in. Don't know how serious that money is, but now minus 13.5, minus 120, I'm starting to see 14s here. What are your thoughts on this one?
Well, you got a lot of these tout sheets that float around out there. Some are good, some are bad. I'm not knocking them. That their big move this week is Nebraska, and that seems to be the buzzword. I will tell you this as a Nebraska fan, I've faded them more than I bet on them, and because my favorite team's whoever I got money on. So at the end of the day, I don't know why all of a sudden there's a huge buy sign on Nebraska because they beat up on Fordham. And they kind of look like dog crap doing it for a quarter and a half where they finally got their motor running last week. And the other thing is they have Oklahoma on deck for the 50th anniversary of the game of the century here. If you take a look at Buffalo, this is a formidable team. They've got a lot of returning starters. They were a 6-1 team last year. They lost Jarrett Patterson guy to the NFL. Great running back. Well, Kevin Marks Jr. filled in for him in the Camellia Bowl and got the MVP. The guy can run the football. They got a good quarterback. They're extremely well coached. And I'm telling you right now, they were 30th in defense in the nation last year. Holding opponents under 20, right around 20 points, if I'm not mistaken. I have it written down, but I don't see how Nebraska is going to walk away in this. And the other thing, too, is under Scott Frost, unlike Fordham, when they play a team that's got any moxie, Nebraska finds ways to lose football games under Scott Frost. Look at what happened to Illinois. Oh, we're going to clean up those turnovers. We're going to clean up those special teams blunders, and we're going to clean up those penalties finally in my 4th year. Well, they look like a absolute dog turd in a cantaloupe patch against Illinois, a team with a brand new coach, and we knocked out their starting quarterback the second series of the game and got waxed on national television. Mm-hmm. So I'm not willing to lay 13.5 with Nebraska because they can't close out games. Are they better talent-wise, at least on the field, than Buffalo? Yes, but I don't think they're 2 touchdowns better talent-wise, in all honesty, especially with Oklahoma on deck. But because Nebraska, until they could close out games late in the game against a good team, I'm not going to bank on them. If I was to bet Nebraska, the only way I would look in this game is the first half line sitting at 6.5, 7. And that I might go there, but I'm not going to trust them for a whole game, especially against a team that has a stud running back, an experienced quarterback, and all 4 of their offensive linemen returning.
Man, I have no idea, Tony, why people are betting Nebraska. I'm looking at some of the movements here on Action, and I don't think a ton of money's in yet. But
No.
I just don't understand this line move when they look this bad. I mean, Illinois with Sikowski just lost to UTSA, and I'm not saying that UTSA is an improved team, or sorry, is it a bad team? They are improved, but this is still a Group of 5 team this has been in the doldrums for years. Texas San Antonio used to be the redhead stepchild of the college football of their Conference USA. So in my opinion, I'm like, of course, when we handicap, we don't put 2 and 2 and 2 together. That's the way you lose. But there's some tells that show me that Nebraska isn't a big game type team anymore. I mean, they can't win when they're big favorites. They seem Scott Frost has been a big disappointment. Their quarterback gets the yips during games. Games, man. And it's going to happen again. He's going to get the yips again. So Buffalo's coming into this game like this is their Super Bowl, right? Because they want that name. They want to beat them. And it's not like they didn't blow away Mercer or whoever the hell they played. I think it was Mercer, like 50-60 to nothing. They took care of their FCS opponent like nothing as well. Great point on the running back there because he looked good.
Stud.
And with the look ahead, my number's 9. Nebraska minus 9. So I'm probably going to be a player here in Buffalo.
If the line was 9, I still would have a problem trying to bet Nebraska. I really would, the way they play. And the one thing that's perplexed me since day one was how Scott Frost has just hitched his wagon to Adrian Martinez. This kid has cost them more games than any quarterback that I can remember Nebraska having, going back to Steve Taylor, but even before Tommy Frazier. I just can't remember a quarterback that they've had that cost them this many games. Zach Taylor, the quarterback of the Bengals, the coach of the Bengals now was under Callahan, came up as a 1-year player, stuck him in there from Arizona State on a transfer. I mean, he even played better than him, although he threw a lot of picks, but he threw the ball 50 times a game. But at the end of the day, if you want to put your money on Nebraska as a double-digit favorite, then you better have a lot of screw you money laying around because it's a dangerous proposition.
Very dangerous. And I'm wondering where this is going to end up. I think there's going to have to be some sharper action coming back on Buffalo at some point here. I doubt that I'm going to get a 14.5, but I am watching this line here, and I would almost think that 13.5 might be the close. So I'm going to
ask yourself this question, buddy. How many? I know a lot of sharps in Vegas. They won't get near Nebraska.
No, they won't
get near them. I'm telling this to people that are watching this. I know sharp bettors, professional sports bettors living in Las Vegas, and I've got a good network of information. And you hear a lot of these handicappers coming out of the woodwork now since all this legalized sports betting that they have inside sources, and the kid's 24 years old capping out of grandma's basement down in Jersey, whatever they're doing here. I live in Vegas. I've been doing this 30 years. You mentioned my years on national radio. I have sources, and I know professional bettors, and they won't get near Nebraska as a double-digit favorite. Maybe against Fordham or Tallahassee JUCO or somebody, but Buffalo is a legitimate team that has their eye on winning the MAC title this year. Folks, I'm telling you, be careful.
Be very careful with this one. And same with my sources as well, Tony. 100% well said. None of us will. So there you go. Let's move into the final game that we're going to discuss here. Ohio State is home versus the Oregon Ducks. And this spread is about 14 points, a higher total of 63.5. And I'll start on this one, buddy. For two powerhouse schools, if you only looked at one thing, their recruiting and the spread, you probably would want to lean towards your Oregon Ducks in this. But I'll tell you right now that ever since Chip Kelly left, this Oregon team has just kind of been a failure in many ways. They don't get up for some of the bigger games. They kind of blow it like they did last year against I forgot who it was. They dropped a big game last year. They almost lost to Fresno State last week.
Yeah.
And I know they lost Kavion Thibodeau, their stud defensive end. That's not
huge.
Good.
That's huge.
It is huge because that's the pass rush.
That would be to give this to people that don't follow Pac-12 football that follow you and watch your show. That would be like the New York Giants losing Lawrence Taylor going into the Super Bowl.
Yeah, that's how he is to this team.
Yeah,
and he gets to the quarterback.
Yeah.
Now Ohio State, they're a little bit younger. They're more vulnerable in ways, but at home here, I can see that this could be a blowout here. And I know I did not like what happened in Minnesota. I thought there's some piss poor Big Ten officiating there, but you still saw the speed of Ohio State. You still saw what reminds you that this team is for real. You know, those deep crossing routes and things like that. And CJ Stroud looked okay. He looked good. He looked fine to me. There was a maybe the second quarter wasn't as good, but he ended up kind of getting it together here. Now, what I will say is that my numbers are telling me that Ohio State is the side because I have them about minus 15.5 here. But I don't think you're going to get much of a buyback on Oregon here because this could be a blowout. I didn't bet it. What are your thoughts?
I'm along the same lines here. I probably would play first half. I like playing first half lines and cutting that down to around 7.5, on the 14. I think they'll be up by 10 by halftime. And I think it could really get away from Oregon in the second half, but it might get away from them early in the first half. Now, I don't put a lot of stock into that Minnesota game for a couple of reasons. Number one is anybody that knows the Big Ten, PJ Fleck, or knows the MAC conference, PJ Fleck is a damn good football coach, and he has good players up there. And it's unfortunate for Minnesota they lost their running back this year because that guy is an absolute freaking stud. He's going to have 100 yards on anybody he runs against. I don't care. A rat's ass is Michigan, Ohio State, Georgia. I don't care. And secondly, it's the first game of the year on the road against a quality opponent. And you've got a quarterback basically with the first start in a game like that. He's not going to look great. At the end of the day, he had 13 completions, but he had 4 TDs, and he didn't lose the game for him. Like we were just talking about Nebraska. Their quarterback loses the game for them. He didn't lose the game for him. He won, and he helped them win. And I think Oregon, you think about the point that you made about Chip Kelly. Interesting. Scott Frost was his offensive coordinator for 3 years when he was up there. But at the end of the day, you talk about Oregon kind of being a disappointment, and they kind of are. And look how good of a quarterback Herbert is in the NFL. And they couldn't get it done with him.
Yeah, right.
I'm just saying, I think this is too much of a finesse style football team going on the road 2,000 miles across the country against a team that's going to absolutely smack you in the mouth, that has 5-star recruits all over the field and sitting on the bench coming in, and probably better coached. I'll take Ohio State here. I'd lay the number.
Okay, there you go. Lay the number with Ohio State. Yeah. This is a statement game too, because they want to establish that if anybody else is getting in the playoffs with Georgia and Alabama, it's going to be them no matter what happens. Because they know they could have a slip up. It could be a Penn State. It could be the championship versus whomever, Iowa, Wisconsin, whoever makes it. But they know this, and so they're going to make a statement in this game. I definitely laying the points here.
Yeah, it's going to be tough. It's going to be tough for Ohio State this year. They showed some vulnerabilities in that game against Minnesota, but bear in mind, Minnesota is a good football team. So that being said, it's going to be very difficult for them to get through the Big Ten unscathed this year, in my opinion. I think there's a lot of good teams in the Big Ten this year.
For sure, there absolutely is. The good thing for Ohio State is they do at least avoid Iowa. this year, which might be the strongest, and they avoid Wisconsin, which might be the second strongest on that side. So we'll see what happens here. Well, let's move into some NFL then, Tony, and some pretty big games, obviously, for everybody this week. Everyone's excited. People are getting their contests on. The lines have been kind of frozen for a little while, but that's okay. Yeah. You know, I mean, these lines have been out for 2-3 months now, buddy. So, but there's a couple plays I'm eyeing up here. And I have a potential one on Arizona versus Tennessee. Tennessee's laying about 3 points. It's actually more juiced on the Arizona side. The total on this is 52. Now, this game to me has the makeups of a potential shootout. I mean, you obviously have Arizona high scoring type offense, some really good athletes on that team, and then you have now the Titans, who just got better by adding Julio Jones to A.J. Brown, and they have the best running game in the nation, the best playoff game or play action game. Now, the total, I'm going to lean to the over because I haven't made a decision on that. But what worries me about the over a little bit is that I know Vrabel's a defensive mind, and he's a little bit embarrassed by the way their defensive been. And they picked up Bud Dupree, Denico Autry, and Janoris Jenkins in the offseason to fix some of that. Yeah. So I wonder if they put their defensive stamp on that. Now, if that happens, that means I like this side a lot more. Their strength is obviously running the ball with Henry, and that plays into Arizona's weakness because Arizona can't stop the run, and they should have gave up more rushing yards if they weren't winning some of those games last year because they had a pretty easy schedule last year. Now, minus their own division. Now, I like J.J. Watt a lot, but he's not a run stuffer, and they need to pick up some more defensive tackles to go with that Xavier Collins draft pick, and they didn't. And I think their defense could absolutely get mauled this game. So I'm probably going to be a player on Tennessee -3, but I'm going to watch it a little bit more and see what happens. And I'm going to give a strong lean over to the 52 because Arizona is a big fourth quarter team. They can make some comebacks, and they try not to stop scoring too. But I'm going to give you the -3 right now and see what your thoughts are.
Well, this is a game, a couple of things on the total first. I do a weekly show on YouTube for DocsSports on our channel on YouTube with Sean Salisbury, ex-NFL quarterback. Everybody knows who Sean is. And he made a statement the other day that really, he spent 10 years in the NFL. He won a Grey Cup up in Canada with the Winnipeg Blue Bombers, starting quarterback. He said, always at the beginning of the year in the NFL, the defensive coordinators are usually one up against offenses out of the gate. It's not, and I thought, that's an interesting statement. He said they're always just a little bit ahead of the offenses the first week or so. And secondly, you hit the nail on the head. Vrabel, let me tell you something. The defense that they put on the field last year was quite frankly embarrassing. Because the offense they had, and by the way, the addition of Julio Jones, the offense they had last year was solid. Tannehill was one of the top 5 quarterbacks in the league. This kid can play quarterback. I thought he could when he was down in Miami. But, at the end of the day, this is a perfect fit. There's no team in the NFL that should be able to be more successful at play action passing than the Tennessee Titans with Derrick Henry running the football. Period. That's the end of there's not even, and they got a good offensive line. On the other side of the ball, I'm not sold on Cliff Kingsbury as a head coach in the NFL. I don't think, maybe as a head coach, but maybe not the offensive coordinator. I'm not sure he's utilizing Murray to his full potential. I'm not quite sure what his offensive game plan going into a game usually is because it changes so much during the course of the game based on what the other team's giving him, which he should probably know that up front as an NFL head coach. But that's why he's making the big bucks and I'm picking games out in Vegas. So maybe I don't know what I'm talking about here. But at the end of the day, you easily could see a high-scoring game here. But more so than not, when those tend to show up and raise your eyebrows at the beginning of the year, more times than not, in the 30 years that I've been doing this, they end up being a 2017 ball game. So you got to kind of be aware of that. But the first week of the season, I'm going to have my guys on a lot of 2-team 6-point teasers. And one of those teams is going to be Arizona in this game. I like Arizona plus the 6 to get them to 9. I'm getting them off the 3. I'm getting them through 4. And I'm getting them through the 7, which are all key fall numbers here. I think this is going to be maybe one of the better games of the weekend. It's going to be intriguing from a couple of standpoints. Can we get the offense consistently clicking for Arizona? And can we get some semblance of the defense for Tennessee? And those are both question marks to me, which makes it kind of a no play. But I do think Arizona will hang around and put up, enough points here to keep it within 9. So I'm going to use them as half of a teaser and kind of wimp out on giving you my side or total here because I think it's a coin flip game. They're basically saying it's a pick and ball game at Tennessee's at home, so they're making them lay 3.
I can never argue against a teaser in the NFL with the most efficient market out there. You can sometimes tease it either single way. It's going to hit for you. You're going past the key numbers of 4, 6, and 7 there. There's absolutely nothing wrong with doing that and getting off the 3.
Yeah.
And so that's not a bad idea at all. And to be honest with you, Tennessee has their weaknesses still in the secondary. I'm still not 100% sure. I'm not sold. And so
not with Hopkins running around and Fitzgerald still and Murray. And by the way, if Murray brace contain, there isn't a defensive back on Tennessee that could tackle grandma at Costco pushing a shopping cart. So good luck trying to, rack him up. So there's a potential that can go bad for them.
Yeah, there's a potential for sure.
Yeah.
Now, as far as the line's concerned, I do like the Tennessee, and I'm sticking with that.
Okay.
But what I will say is I did like how they stopped running quarterbacks like Lamar Jackson. Now, they did blow it one time against him. I think they played twice last year, but they seem to contain him and not over pursue him so he doesn't take off. The last thing you want happening is Lamar Jackson type quarterbacks running on you because that's 5 to 10 yards. You will lose the game if that keeps happening. So,
that's third down conversions. That's what makes Patrick Mahomes, Lamar Jackson, Murray, the 3rd and 6, 3rd and 5s, 3rd and 6s, where they're doing a rollout pass, trying to flare the tight end or do a drag route with somebody and just get it underneath the coverage and get the move the chains. When that's not there, those quarterbacks that are capable of running get those first downs and keep drives alive. That's what kills teams.
Yeah, that's what kills teams. And you got to keep them in the pocket and keep them throwing away from the middle of the field, and then you have your chance, and that's how they beat them. So that's kind of what I'm looking at here. Now there's slim pickings this week, though, in the NFL. These lines have been beaten to death already, but I'm going to be playing a few teasers myself. Let's move into the Chargers versus the Washington football team. This is a pick 'em. I have it at pick 'em. The total's about 44.5. I'll let you get started with this one.
Well, I liked them at mine. I liked Washington at +1. I did this video on this last week as a look ahead. They were +1. Now they've lost that. But at the end of the day, basically, if you look at you pretty much you figure, okay, we're going to give 2 to 3 points for a home field. So they're still saying in a pick 'em that LA's better. At the end of the day, you got the better defense getting points at home, basically. Handicap at 101, you always take them. Secondly, we got a brand new coach, brand new coaching system. You've got an inexperienced quarterback with a year under his belt that's going to be an absolutely fantastic player. Herbert is. My thing here is, what are you going to get? You going to get Fitz magic or Fitz tragic? Which one's it going to be? And if you get Fitz magic, he can play with anybody in the league. The guy can get chucked the rock. And surprisingly, if you look at Washington in this game, they've got a lot of playmakers around the ball on offense as well. They really do. Because I tell you what, you're going to have to play your best game offensively here, Kev, to beat these guys. Because that defense of Washington is absolutely no joke. That is a very, very good defense here. And I put this out once, and I'll put it out again. I'm a Fitzmagic believer. I think he can play ball. I think Miami was idiots for getting rid of him to bring Tua in there. I don't think he's ready yet. I think Fitzmagic and the Skins get it, the Washington football team. Speaking of old school, reverting back to the beginning of the show, I think Washington gets him here. I think that the Chargers are going to have a good year. I think the Chargers are a team you better bring your A game to beat them if you want to beat them. Whenever you're lining up against them, I think they have that type of talent on the team. But we got a new coach here and some learning curves and growing pains. Rivera, you got an old wily veteran head coach, and you got an old wily veteran quarterback here at home with some playmakers around him and one hell of a stiff defense. In a pick-em game, I'm going to take the better defense.
Yeah, and I don't disagree with that way of thinking. That is key. Defense, home, crowd. I mean, remember, the crowd's coming back here. Yeah. And that's why those totals went over so early last year. There was no crowd. Well, now it's going to get quite loud in Washington here, especially the first game when teams are coming in. I was hoping to make Washington a teaser candidate if I can get it to 1.5. If I can find like a Chargers minus 1.5, I'll tease the plus 1.5 past the 7 all day.
Yeah.
I don't know if I'll get it, but I'll shop around to see if that happens. But in the meantime, I do like the new coach, Brandon Staley, for the Chargers team. But another handicapping 101 thing, you don't bet a brand new NFL coach on their first game.
No, you don't.
You definitely don't, because it's just that extra motivation and to save embarrassment for coaches like Riverboat Ron Rivera over there, and the team knows that as well. So they're going to give it their A game right now. But it's just like you said, I think Fitzmagic is a better quarterback than Tua right now, and they just jumped the gun to save embarrassment of drafting him to get rid of it, and that could just completely crumble in their face.
Yeah.
The good news for Miami is that they were at least a third place team, so they don't play a second place schedule.
Yeah,
they did miss the playoffs. But going back to this game, don't ever bet a brand new coach unless they're facing each other. There's actually, unfortunately, 2 games that 2 new coaches do face each other, and I was kind of wanting to pick those coaches apart coming into this week. But there's still a few opportunities out there that you have to fade those new coaches.
And so one other point I wanted to make, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but I would get your reaction to this. I think we both can agree that Herbert's going to be a great quarterback in the NFL, at least what we saw last year.
From what I saw, yes.
And there's no doubt, and he's got some targets. I'm not completely sold on their running game, but he's got some targets. That being said, if I took a look back at last year's schedule and how he played certain games, he struggled against really good defenses a little bit. Now, he didn't have to face Denver's defense last year at full strength because Denver was all beat up. So he's going to see a really good defense twice this year in the AFC West. But I will tell you, in his young career, this is the best defense he's seen as a player since he started in the NFL. We're going to find out what he's made of on Sunday.
You absolutely will. This is a great tell game for what you can expect. Now, even if Washington wins this game, maybe Fitzmagic scores some points. If they score some points against that defense, that's going to be the tell for me. Not if they win or lose this game. It's going to be how many yards they put up and how they do when they get down there. Because if they're actually, if this game goes over and they lose it 24-21, I'm going to like that performance probably from Herbert. So great point on that one. Well, let's bring up the very last game we're going to discuss then. And I think your Kansas City hat there, Tony, is a little bit of a tell. You sounds like you're going to have a little fun checking out their opening game here. And it's a big one because Cleveland is a very they're not the Browns that we know of. They made the playoffs last year. They had 11 wins. They have a lot of talent on this team. I'm still not sold on their coach 100%, but you got a spread here of 6.5. It's not hitting the 7. You have the total of about 53 points. I'm going to let you have at it here. What do you got for me?
Well, I've got 2 round trip tickets. I'm taking the wife on Southwest into Kansas City on Friday. I'm going to the game.
Yep. That's fantastic.
And being back there, being a fan and this, that, and the other, I'm not going to lay 6.5 or 7 points with any NFL team on opening week. I don't give a rat's ass whether it's Tampa on Thursday or what have you. Cleveland is a very good football team. Baker Mayfield is a lot better quarterback than people give him credit for. This kid is a playmaker. He's a gamer. He's improved every year he's been in the league. He has a plethora of talent around him. I'm not sold on Kansas City's defense at all. They're middle of the – when you have an offense like Patrick Mahomes, Kelsey, Hill, the weapons that he has, and now a completely revamped offensive line, basically with 3 Pro Bowlers on it and good blocking tight ends, you can get by with the 16th, 18th ranked defense and get into the AFC Championship game. When you're that good offensively, you can just trade punches with people. You don't have to – good – high-scoring college basketball teams when UNLV was doing it back in the 90s. They didn't play defense. They didn't need to. They just outscore you.
And that's all you need sometimes.
Yeah,
I mean, if you have a hiccup, you're always in the game. You can always trust them.
Yeah.
When it's opposite, you have a bad defense and they slip up one time and your offense ain't good, you're not catching up. It's just the way it is.
And, Kansas City, the year they won the Super Bowl, every game in the playoffs, they were down double digits and won by double digits during the game. So that's how good of an offense they have, and they're loaded. Mahomes is the best quarterback in the NFL. Maybe 1A. Well, I'm never going to kick Tom Brady to the curb because the guy's a stud. He makes us old men feel good about ourselves. So, hey, you know what? It's kind of like Phil Mickelson winning the PGA. Hey, somebody in their 50s like me won the big one, still beat the flat bellies. I'm happy. But at the end of the day, he's one of the top 3 quarterbacks in the NFL without question. But at the end of the day, I think this will be one of the better ball games of the weekend. I think it's going to be a tight one. I think it's going to be a nail biter. And I would take a look at Cleveland in this game. I'm wanting a Kansas City win, but I definitely would take Cleveland, let's say, along with Arizona in a 2-team 6-point teaser, because you're getting them over 7 and over 8 and through 10 and on 12.5 right now, for crying out loud. And I want to see what Kansas City's defense does this year. I think it's going to be they're going to figure out, this, you've been doing this a long time. Sooner or later, people are going to figure out Lamar Jackson. They're going to figure out Patrick Mahomes. They're going to figure out Russell Wilson. They're going to figure out, those type of quarterbacks, not to stop them because you can't, but how to contain them, manage a game plan around them. And they've got enough film on Mahomes. And by the way, Cleveland's seen him 3 years in a row now, a couple times in the playoffs. So, they're going to figure out a way to disrupt that a little bit and hang around. And like I said, Cleveland's capable of putting up 24, 28 points in this game against Kansas City. This may be one of the higher scoring games of the weekend.
It might be. And I will tell you this, I am not going to be laying -6.5 with Kansas City either.
No.
But what I will say, though, is I don't know if the sample size is extremely small, but the last 2 years, this Cleveland team, for some reason, got their asses cleaned the first week of the season each year against Tennessee.
Baltimore last year.
Yeah.
They were catching 7 last year at Baltimore, and I like this new head coach. I don't know. Don't think he's the second coming of Christ, but I like him a lot better than the previous guy they had in there. And before that, Hugh Jackson. So I was thinking, well, they're going to go up there. They're catching 7.5 against the Ravens. And what was it, 34-6 or something? It was absolutely just a total annihilation. But that's one thing that does scare me. But one thing I guess I didn't throw in there was, again, when you're talking about not laying 6.5, and I'll revert back to the Washington Redskins analysis real quick. The team with the best defense is getting 6.5 points, buddy.
Yeah, but it's a road team. But yes, they are getting 6.5 points. I'm going to lean Cleveland just on that number. And and so I'm going to at least put that out there. But what I will say is that I do like what they did with the offensive line, getting Joe Thuney from the Patriots, Orlando Brown from the Ravens, and I even think the Ravens did okay with that one. I mean, he was expensive, and the Ravens don't need that left tackle with Lamar quite as much as Mahomes does. Now, this game in the playoffs was a dicey one for Kansas City at home. It was a 5-point win, and if I remember properly, they might have been outgained.
Well, they lost Mahomes in the second quarter.
They lost him for a little while. Then did he come back?
No.
Did he come back that game? Okay, so his knee got banged up, right? It was that hit. Okay, I couldn't remember if he came back. But what I did see was the talent on Cleveland's team kind of stepped up a little bit.
Oh yeah,
because they're the second most talented team out there. But man, this spread is. I mean, I think the spread by itself is probably perfect at 6.5. And sometimes you're going to deal with that.
You know, the one thing too here. We talked about a lot of additions for you mentioned a lot of additions for Kansas City, especially on the offensive line, which, they were just decimated with injuries in the Super Bowl, and they had the offensive line that they put on the field. That's the first time the center and Mahomes ever even worked together. So
center and guard.
Yeah, and I'm not making excuses. Tampa Bay beat their ass, and I'm not making excuses. Tampa Bay was the better football team that day, without question. But that being said, bear in mind, too, when you're thinking about Cleveland, we talked about additions to Kansas City. We didn't talk about a key player that left, and that was Sammy Watkins. We would have not won a Super Bowl 2 years ago without Sammy Watkins. We would have not won as many games in Kansas City without him, but he's gone, and he was a real good possession receiver. The second, third hot read, always worked his way open, communicated well on a lot of busted plays with Mahomes. He knew they had a lot of good chemistry together, and that's taken away. And because, you're going to draw double coverage on Hill. You're going to have, a safety over the top on Kelsey with the linebacker covering him. So that third option for Patrick Mahomes was always Sammy Watkins. I know Hardeman's good, this, that, and the other, but that's going to be interesting to see how that works out a little bit.
Yeah, especially if they lose depth there, because Watkins didn't play a hell of a lot last year, but he definitely played a key role the year before when they won the Super Bowl. So good points on that. So is there any other games out there you want to throw in? Or I know you gave out Washington +1, which is just about as good as pick 'em anyway. You said you're going to possibly tease the first one we talked about, I believe, the
Arizona.
Yep. And in college, I'm not sure if you made a play on Buffalo or Nebraska. Ohio State, you might lay it at the half, right?
I'll lay Ohio State the half. That'd be my best bet of the show. The rest of it, I'll tell you, the best free tip you're going to get watching any sports handicapping show, whether it's this one, whether it's on ESPN or Fox or whatever whoever else, NBC's got one now, what a bunch of guys that know what they're talking about. But at the end of the day, just remember this weekend, still in college football, less is more. If you spread it around and start laying a bunch of big numbers, we talked about two big numbers on this show. Nebraska 13.5, Ohio State 14, cut them in half, play the first half, but don't spread bets around with a bunch of big favorites this week and think that you're going to make a bunch of money. And in the NFL, you're anything over 4.5, 5, you better love them, because anything can happen in week one, folks. I can tell you that right now. So I don't have a lot of extra free opinions for you, because I'm still trying to find 5 or 6 games, college and pro combined, that's worth putting out to my clients as a quality product this week right now. So, and there'll be some teasers involved here in the NFL, but at the end of the day, I'd be very careful this week. It's dangerous.
Absolutely. It is dangerous. And some of the plays I made already had some lines that moved away from my number anyway. So it's kind of hard to do this in the middle of the week. But as lines move more, there will be more plays from both of us. So, Tony, thank you so much for coming on the show, man. I always love your insights. You have a blast this weekend at this game. It's going to be exciting. I mean, it's still summer, so you don't have to wear your snowsuit or anything. And you're gonna have a really good time watching this one. But I really appreciate you coming on. And where could our listeners get your information?
Oh, you got it right there on the screen, DocsSports.com. You click over there. There's a free $60. We'll park $60 in any new member's account. You can use it we have a profit guarantee where we park credit back in your account if you're not, turning a good profit. And of course, over there on YouTube, just check out Doc Sports on YouTube. We got myself, Sean Salisbury, myself, and Scott Spreitzer, who's been around forever. I know you know who he is. He's part of Doc's team. We got a bunch of guys over there giving out a lot of good information on video on Doc's YouTube channel. And of course, this is our 50th year in the business. So that's saying something in this day and age. So, and it's a very reputable company, and there's no one's going to blow any smoke up your ass. We'll tell you like it is. So come over and check us out.
There you go. Since 1971, Doc Sports.
Yeah.
Long time move. And Tony.
Hey, Nebraska won the national title in 1971 with Bob Devaney as head coach. Johnny the Jet Rogers, won the Heisman Trophy. And we had Jerry Taggy at quarterback, and that's why it's the 50th anniversary this year, playing Oklahoma. We're going to go down to Norman and get beat 62-3.
They were much better in 71, Tony.
Yeah.
There's your history lesson, everyone. Thank you so much for coming on. We'll be texting this weekend, man.
All right, buddy. Thanks.